Alright, so as we all know, Roblox Pressure has a ton of entities in the game. They can either be the best thing to ever exist, or maybe the worst thing you can ever encounter. Today, we'll be ranking these Pressure entities and then putting them on a tier list. And I'll be rating these guys based off the following: their purpose/mechanic, their visual/appearance, the audio/sound, and also their threat level. And keep in mind, we're gonna go alphabetically on the list, so let's start off with our first entity, and that's the Abomination, which isn't even in the game yet. So let's move on to the abstract art. Basically, they're statues made of concrete, and they either spawn by themselves or in herds. And at the moment they're completely harmless, and literally their purpose is just to stand there and assert their dominance. I believe they make no sound whatsoever, and I'm not gonna lie, I actually like seeing these guys. So I'm gonna just place them in the B tier. Moving on, we have the Angler, which is probably the most basic entity in the game. It is a node monster. Their main mechanic is to rush down the hallway and kill the player upon sight. The noise they make is pretty scary though, they're just like screaming or something at you. And as for their threat level, they aren't too much of a threat, literally just hide in a locker or something. And I think a B tier will be a fair rating. And speaking about these known monsters, we have Blitz, which is pretty much Angler but faster and way more scarier. And just make sure you notice the double light flickers to know when this guy's coming. And also this entity makes a very haunting noise. And I think Blitz is pretty cool, so let me just place this guy at the top of the B tier. And moving on, we have the Bottom Feeder, which is the new hostile entity in the game. This guy spawns in a dredge room type. Their main purpose is to swim around, annoy you, and of course eat you out. And I do like the fact that there is a small minigame you have to do if this thing ever touches you. And their appearance is kind of weird. It's not too scary, they just look like a mess. And these guys shouldn't be too much of a problem. Literally just keep moving, you'll be fine. And if I had to rank in a tier list, I'll just put it in an A tier. So the next entity we have are the Candle Bearers. As far as their main mechanic goes, they kind of act like a weeping angel type entity if you have a light source in your inventory. And I gotta say, these guys aren't really scary at all. And they aren't too much of a threat. You can literally just run around these guys. For now, I just place them in the B tier. And something similar to them are the Candle Brutes, which is pretty much the same thing, but bigger, and they just hit much harder. And they don't stop when you shine light on them, they just slow down. And overall, I just put them above the Candle Bear in the B tier. Now let's move on to the Chain Smoker. If y'all don't know, this guy smokes 500 packs of cigarettes a day. I mean, just look at him. And for the main mechanic, this guy travels down the hallways very slowly, forcing you to time your lockers correctly. And in my opinion, this guy's just really annoying, and he's just very loud for no reason at all. I'm not a big fan of this guy. C tier for me. But moving on, we have the Deep Sea Bunnies. And let's be real, the Deep Sea Bunnies are definitely the most cutest things to ever exist in Roblox Pressure. Their main purpose is to be loved by you, and also trade with you as well. And in addition, you can also dance with them too. For the most part, there's nothing to worry about, they are completely harmless. Oh! Easy S tier for me, come on now. But moving on, we have the Divine. This is a hostile entity in the game that'll start attacking you if you step onto their grass. Now obviously before the update, these guys were harmless, but now they can move and deal pretty big damage to you. So long story short, just get off their lawn. And me personally, I actually like these guys, I'll just put them in the A tier. And that brings us on to the Infestation. Another hostile entity in the game, and this thing will pretty much force the players to look at her, which will do some damage rapidly upon doing so. The visuals of the entity are pretty good, I love the different colors it comes in. And fun fact, this entity can actually heal you if you flash it. And as for the audio, Infestation has very amazing soundtracks, especially the Outrage one. Overall, Infestation is a very cool entity, it's gonna go into A tier for me. Now let's move on to the Frogger, which basically acts as a rebound type entity in the game. And this entity is a yellow anglerfish and looks very scary. This entity isn't too dangerous, you just have to remember it's gonna come back after leaving one time. And I'll just give it a solid B tier. But moving on, we have the Good People, which is actually a duo of the Painter and the Mask of Sadness. For the main mechanic, it'll lunge at you if you ever open a fake door, and that's what I kinda like about it. It forces the player to check for the correct door, making sure to be careful, especially since they deal big damage. And for those reasons, I'll put this guy in A tier. And that's gonna bring us on to the Harbinger. If you ever encounter this guy, the lighting will turn red, everything will rapidly open and close. Eventually, this frightening looking entity will appear and hunt you down. The Harbinger is very dangerous to come across since there's really no surviving this guy. If you try to hide, you have a near impossible minigame you have to do. And overall, I love the fear factor this thing brings. I just had to place this guy in the S tier. And moving on, we have the imaginary friend. I gotta say, I love this guy. For the most part, the imaginary friend is just there to look at you and support you along your journey. Keep in mind, there will be a voice talking to you now and then, which might be annoying, but sometimes can actually be helpful. Wait, is this the right door? Bro, this woman. Oh! Never mind, she's actually right. But overall, I do love the imaginary friend a lot, so it's gonna go in the S tier for me. That brings us on to the man from the Mindscape. And to be honest, I don't even know who this guy is. Like, this guy's just here to look at you, say hi, and then, like, disappear. Like, that's literally it. This guy's just there. I'm just gonna place this guy in the C tier. And let's move on to Mr. Low-P. Pretty much this guy appears if you're left behind or have fallen into the void. This guy will appear, proceed to touch you, and then bring you back into the game, which I think is very useful. And overall, this guy could be a huge lifesaver. I'll put Mr. Low-P in the A tier. And that brings us on to the Multi-Monster, which is basically an A60 from Roblox rooms, and this thing can come out of nowhere and try to kill you. But at least he gives you a warning, right? This guy does look kind of freaky, with his huge smile and stuff, and his sound effect actually gives me PTSD when I played Roblox rooms a long time ago. Overall, another A tier entity for me. Moving on, we have the Navi AI, which we don't know too much about, so let's just move on to the scuffed version, which is the Painter. Seriously, f this guy. Easy D tier for me. And that brings us on to the Pandemonium, Mr. Minigames himself. Basically, this guy will scream and run at you if he ever sees you. If you hide inside a locker, you'll need to play a fun minigame to survive this guy. And I gotta say, the minigame soundtracks are so good, they're one of the best things I've ever heard. Overall, this entity is very dangerous to encounter. Another easy S tier entity for me. And moving on, we have the Parasites. Being honest here, I find these things to be very annoying. Pretty much these guys will swarm the player if you're too far out there into the water. Another D tier for me. And let's move on to the Pinky, which is pretty much Angler but pink, and instead of a light flicker indicator, this guy just comes. So you gotta make sure you listen and pay attention, and the Pinky will play a screaming or screeching noise. And out of all the node monsters in the game, I like this guy the most, so let me just throw Pinky in the A tier. And that brings us on to the Puddles of Void Mass. Basically, if you enter a locker while these guys are occupying it, they're gonna grab you, bring you inside, and do the unthinkable to you. Which isn't too bad, since it adds another layer of danger, making you more be careful. And me personally, I think they're okay. B tier for me. The next entity is the Redeemer/Hanger, and the main purpose of this entity is to make you reset yourself, like literally. Basically, if you ever grab this Magnum looking weapon, you'll play a simple minigame with this hanger trying to slice you open. And I believe this actually collabed with Decaying Winter as well, which is very nice to see. Overall, I give the Redeemer/Hanger an honest B tier. And let's move on to the Searchlights. You'll see these hostile entities during the grand encounters, and basically these guys will act as some sort of spotlight, if you know what I mean. So these guys are a pretty big threat. For their appearance, they look pretty cool and intimidating, like they're literally in the sky, if you know what I mean. And their music soundtrack is actually amazing, I love it a lot. Overall, another easy S tier entity for me. And that brings us on to the man himself, Sebastian. I mean, let's be real, do I really have to talk about this guy? He's definitely the most beloved character in the game. Another easy S tier for me. But moving on, we have the Squiddles. Now these guys usually lurk in the dark, attacking the player who shines a light at it or gets too close, and they kind of force you to take extra care if you're using a flashlight in a dark room. They aren't too bad. I'd say it's another B tier for me. Now let's head over to Styx. I hope I never see this guy ever. It's going into C tier. That brings us onto the Trench Bleeder. These guys are basically some sort of colossal underwater machine, which could potentially step on you and squish you like a bug. But all I know is that these guys are very loud. Overall, I'll give it a B tier. I like them. Now let's move on to the Turrets, which is another hostile entity in the game. And these things are annoying. I'm not a huge fan of them. I'm just gonna put them in a C tier. And finally, we have the Wall Dweller. Now these things hide within the walls and then eventually pops out to attack the player, which is actually terrifying, but luckily you can hear these guys' footsteps behind you if you have ears. And one thing I love about these guys is that you can kind of eat them if a monster ever kills them. I actually do love these guys a lot. I'll just put them in the A tier. So that's it. That was my pressure entity tier list. Let me know your thoughts on this, if you agree or disagree. Oh yeah, and also, I forgot to include Landmine and Door Trap, but they're probably going to end up in a C tier. And I also did not have the Bouncer and Skelepede, and they'll probably both be in the B tier. Also, I forgot to mention this, but Lady Death is probably in A tier as well. But anyways people, before we end, I just want to give a huge shout out and a huge thanks to all my YouTube channel members. You guys are so amazing. Literally giving me 99 cents for some funny cat emotes. I love y'all. So if you enjoyed, please like. If you guys didn't, please dislike. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.